Cliff, you are the founder and president of the FDD, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And I wanted to bring you on because, well, one, I like you. I enjoy having a conversation with you to talk about foreign policy and all the things that are happening in the world today that America's involved with. And I do want to talk about that. But I've been wondering a lot lately about the invective among MAGA conservatives, if you will. There's a lot of slurs being thrown around among this sphere, and it's pretty ugly out there. And it seems like the worst accusation today is not he's a Nazi, but he's a neocon. And I don't know. I don't think I know what a neoconservative is, because the accusation seems to imply that it is a Jewish conspiracy of warmongers, people who love war at any cost, that want to spread democracy at the point of a gun. They're in the thrall of Zionism, and, they're not really America first, they're war first, or maybe the defense or military industrial complex, maybe they all have shares in Lockheed Martin or something. But it's reached a point where I finally need to get some wisdom clarification, because there are the poster boys of neoconservatism, but anybody who is Jewish is apparently a neoconservative. Anybody who wants to engage in a foreign policy that might include sometimes military action is actually truly for forever wars, as it's called. And I just don't believe any of it anymore. I think it's all just, I don't think I'm a neoconservative. I'm a hardcore MAGA Christian, Judeo-Christian. I am pro-Zionist, emphatically, because of my faith, and I think because of reality. I hate forever wars, but I don't believe in isolationism and making America great. I don't believe those two things go together, and I don't think that the world is a better world if we are isolationists or extreme isolationists. So can you help me, sir?
I'll give it a good.
I have to make a clarification here. We have to get a clarification. Are you or have you ever been a member of the neocon cabal in the United States of America? So first confess or clarify, and then we can go on.
Well, I think it's important to understand where the term comes from and what it actually means. It's used as an all-purpose epithet at this point, and by people who don't understand anything about it. It goes back, quite a few years into the last century, when there were a number of people who were neoconservative. What did that mean? They were new to conservatism. There were people who had been on the left, and they were, as they say, mugged by reality. And because they were mugged by reality, they left the left, and they moved over and became conservatives. Some of them were Jewish. So, for example, Commentary magazine, once upon a time, was a left-wing magazine. And Norman Podhoretz, who is the longtime editor, his son John Podhoretz is the current editor. Norman Podhoretz, at a certain point, realized that he was becoming conservative, and the magazine had to become conservative too. And so it would be fair to say it was a neoconservative publication because it was new to conservatism. Initially, most of the positions that were neoconservative were more about domestic issues than about foreign policy. Understanding such basic economic factors that rent control means that fewer people build housing, and therefore the price of housing goes up for everybody who doesn't have rent control because landlords can't make a living or can't fix their building, that kind of thing. it did become, it took on a foreign policy aspect as well. And I would sum it up by saying, and the neoconservatives thought, unlike the left, that the projection of American power was generally, not always, but generally a good thing, not a bad thing. Because if America doesn't project power, who does? America's adversary. I think it would be a fair criticism to say a lot of neoconservatives were too enthusiastic or too optimistic about the benefits of the projection of American power abroad. You'll remember that President Bush, for example, had a democracy promotion initiative. Fair to say that people would say that, well, that was neoconservative. And Condi Rice had a commission on democracy promotion. I was a member of it. And the idea was more nations can become free and democratic if we just push for it. I don't think it worked out very well. We can talk about why. I like Condi Rice, but it was an experiment in a sense, and not an entirely successful one. At this point, I think someone like you, and I think someone like me, you're not a globalist because
God forbid.
No. But let's understand, people don't always. I just had this conversation with Admiral Mark Montgomery, who is at FDD, and it's actually on a podcast I did, and he said that he was a globalist. I said, no, you're not. Let me explain to you why you're not. A globalist is somebody who thinks the UN essentially should be a global government. You don't believe that. I know you don't. What you're saying is you are something of an internationalist. You worry about Taiwan. You worry about Ukraine. You worry about Israel. You worry about South Korea. You think America, you served for 34 years in the U.S. Navy, rising to the rank of admiral. You think that was a good service, and you were protecting American interests around the world against America's adversaries. That doesn't make you a globalist. It may make you a conservative internationalist. And it's also important to understand globalism and globalization are two separate concepts. Globalism, again, is the idea of global government, international government, giving power to the UN and various international NGOs that claim to be for things like human rights, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, all of which are corrupt. You know that. You know that. Most listeners understand that. Globalization is something different. Globalization is the fact that we have economic interdependence. If I think it's a good idea that I can go to my supermarket in the winter and buy strawberries from Mexico, that's the result of globalization. I like to buy bananas in January. They're not grown here. That's globalization. That's international trade. Now, is international trade always good? No, because what we don't want is for strategic commodities to come from a place like communist China, and we depend on them. That's a bad thing. We have to, we don't want our pharmaceuticals all coming from China. So we have to watch out for that. But globalization is a process of interdependence in some ways, which is fine as long as we keep an eye on it and we don't sacrifice our national security in order to get even cheaper bananas. Okay, I don't really want oil from Venezuela, where Maduro is the dictator and is anti-American and is in bed with Cuba and Iran and Russia and China. That's not a good thing. So I want America to have energy dominance in the world. Doesn't mean there won't be energy coming from other places. There will, but we should be dominant. In fact, as you may know, there's a project on that right now that out of the White House with the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, and with Doug Burgum of Interior. And actually, FDD has lent somebody for 3 months to help put together this committee on American energy dominance. So when people say neocon, that's, and as for forever wars, let me just say this. You know how you get forever wars? When you don't win wars. When you let your opponent get up from the mat, rest a little bit, wash his face to fight again. That's how you end up with forever wars. If you defeat your enemy, you don't have a forever war.
I would add that when it comes to globalization, trade is one thing, and there is interdependence. I don't even know if I like that word, though. there is trade between nations, and you get your bananas, and I'm with you on the banana thing. And you do not rely upon, especially hostile nations, you don't get your defense department's parts for its critical. I don't think you should get any parts to any military equipment or, otherwise from communist China. I don't think they should. They should not sell us one bolt, not one bolt.
I wouldn't trust it, absolutely. And we right now get too many parts, and including in our weapon systems from places like communist China. And there are questions with batteries and other things they sell. And by the way, one of the things FDD researches on a constant basis is where things are coming from and how the communist Chinese, not least, are getting into our supply chains and how we have to get them out.
Not only supply chains, but also the fact that they are putting off switches, essentially, that have an override. In case you take that out, there's an override where they are communicating within major systems, like power systems. I'm trying to think transformers. And also green energy. I don't know exactly if it's
everything that comes from China. You got to look at with a very skeptical eye and see what could they put in it, either to cut off grid, cut off our energy, gather useful intelligence on us. All of that is a serious.
And I don't think it's limited to China. I know it's not limited to China.
It's not limited to China, but China is the most sophisticated.
Sophisticated
area.
But then the other caveat I would like to insert for my audience, because they know how I feel about this and I don't want to allow it to go unsaid. The flooding of our labor market with foreign labor through the very illegitimate, ill-conceived, and corrupt, prone with fraud visa system, as well as the offshoring of first our manufacturing base, so 60,000 plus, 80,000 plus factories went to mostly China, the offshoring of call centers to the Philippines and India, which are millions of incredibly, good jobs for a lot of people. And then the offshoring of our white collar, our technology, our banking, our insurance industries, where India now has access to our financial data, our private medical data, and a host of other things, as well as the fact that we've offshored first our blue collar or manufacturing labor pool or jobs to China, and now we're offshoring millions of jobs to India, primarily in the white collar sector, is to me a political and economic abomination of the highest source. And I think it is the greatest threat to America's economy and our way of life for the coming decades. I think that India, I call it not in a defense issue or as an enemy in terms at this point as a military adversary, but is China 2.0. So I do have to say that because I think that globalizing our labor economy has been a tragedy of unimaginable effect. And,
And keep in mind, the previous administration had an open borders policy. They didn't admit it, but that's what it was. Millions of people coming in. Some of them just want to work here, want a better life, no question. But some of them are terrorists. A lot of them were too many of them were criminals. That was a country has to have borders. The previous administration did not want to have borders. We can talk about why that was, but that's the case. The Trump administration has done an extraordinary job of securing our borders. That's good. So I want to praise the Trump administration for that. I will criticize the Trump administration for not yet abiding by the law to remove China's control of TikTok. which is how young people are getting their information, and it's propagandizing. Having the Communist Party of China owning and controlling TikTok and its algorithms is equivalent to, during the Cold War, having the Kremlin and the Communist Party of Russia control the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and the LA Times, CBS, NBC, and ABC. We have a law passed. Supreme Court unanimously upheld that law. President Trump has resisted enforcing the law up to now. I think this is it's very important, and people need to talk to him about this, that he do so, that the Communist Party of China not own this information.
So I would say, and this is really actually not where I wanted to take you, but I think it bears saying this, that I don't even find the illegal immigration discussion that interesting anymore, because if we must deport and we must right the wrong and do so aggressively, I think it is good for the world. I think it's very good for Europe, the UK, to see that, yes, these things are possible and it's good, and we must, if we want to be a sovereign nation, if we want to retain our American character, which I feel that Americans have a very strong belief that America should remain America, and that by importing foreigners without the idea and the exploration of, is this group of foreigners going to change irrevocably our American character, our political system, overwhelm it, not just with leftism, Marxism, because that is very real, but obviously Islam is contrary to our declaration, or Sharia, right, to our declaration in our Constitution, and also other disparate cultures en masse will only seek to or serve to create cultures within our culture that are permanent, that do not just meld in and become Americanized. And I think that that's something that intelligent people that are disregarded for decades now know to be true. And doing it, whether it's done illegally, mostly through the southern border and mostly Hispanic, that's one form. But I think the greater threat is the so-called legal immigration that is overwhelmed our labor pool, and Americans are having to compete. This is the globalist issue, globalism issue, not globalism, globalization issue that you brought up. That when the American worker who doesn't want to work in China and India or anywhere else, their ecosystem, their market for their jobs are American companies working in America. So there's a limited number of jobs, but they are competing with a flooded labor market from offshoring and massive, like we have so many millions of temporary foreign workers in America today that they have to compete with hundreds of millions around the world for domestic jobs, because those jobs are either being outsourced. Even now, chemical engineers in the energy industry are being exported down to India. So our chemical engineers are now losing like 10,000 this year alone. It may be 20, 30,000. They all say that they are going to export all those jobs to India. And so as far as the globalization issue, I think the labor pool being flooded by offshoring jobs and onshoring workers, so-called legally, but yet even if it were legal, because most of it's fraudulent, but even if it were legal, it shouldn't be, because what is happening is the middle class is being stripped and gutted. Small town America, middle town America, Black America, especially. And the middle class is shrinking, but it's also being degraded. So what is middle class maybe a decade ago or 2 decades ago, our young people, the children my kids' age, they're from like 20-something to 40, they can't expect necessarily always to buy a home. Well, my kids are, but buy a home, get married, buy a home, have 3 kids, etc. And that's another, I think that's contributing also to the decline in our our birth rate. So that kind of globalization, I do not agree with whatsoever, but that's another topic, and I didn't want to throw that in there, but that was my caveat for my audience because I want them to know. Yeah. So back to neocon. As it's being used today, tell me how the average American, I always thought neocon meant new conservative. That's what I always thought, right? And then I found out, as I said before, no, it's basically a Jewish cabal, a Zionist cabal, and it's about warmongering and forever wars. And so let's talk for a moment about that. Let's talk about how the projection of American power is within certain confines and definitions a positive thing. Defend that for me, because I agree with it, but I want you to defend it.
Well, take the most recent example. Since there was a revolution in Iran in 1979, I was a young foreign correspondent covering it. It's when I first heard the shouts of death to America and death to Israel. And I understood back then, and I can tell you a little more about this, why this was not an Iranian revolution, it was an Islamic revolution. The purpose was to reestablish Islamic superiority and dominance in the world. After all, Islamic empires for 1,000 years were dominant in most of the world.
Right.
And that ended when? After World War II, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed.
World War I.
I'm sorry, World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed.
Come on, get it straight, Cliff.
All right. And shortly after that, the Muslim Brotherhood was created. And the idea of the Muslim Brotherhood was we need a new caliphate. We need a new Muslim empire. We need to reestablish Islamic superiority and dominance in the world. And this revolution was about that. It was, again, we talk about it was Shia and it was Persian rather than Arab and Sunni, but it was about the same.
They were heavily influenced by Muslim Brotherhood. Heavily influenced.
Absolutely. Actually, the current supreme leader, he's been supreme leader since 1989, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, translated the Muslim Brotherhood writings from Arabic into Farsi, into Persian.
Just tell me again the name of that revolutionary or that Islamist who wrote, it seems like it starts with a Q or...
Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb.
Sayyid Qutb.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, QUTB. Okay, so for 46 years they've been chanting death to America, death to Israel. And that's the intention. How do you achieve that? You need nuclear weapons as a convenient way to achieve that goal. President Trump, I think quite rightly, decided they were getting too close to achieving that goal. He could have let the Israelis simply do it, but they didn't really have the means to do it in any efficient way. I'm not saying they do it, but it was difficult. He knew he had the means because he had B-2 bombers, stealth bombers, a remarkable aircraft based in Missouri, and he had MOPs, massive ordnance penetrators, that dig deep into the ground and don't explode until they're well underground. And he knew that, for example, at Fordo, this was a nuclear facility built inside a mountain. Israel didn't have the ordnance that could penetrate. They could find a way. So what did he do? He used American power. He projected it. He sent the B-2 bombers with the massive ordnance penetrators, and he hit Fordo hard, and he hit Isfahan hard, and he hit Natanz hard. The regime in Iran still has the same intention, but they've been set back at least 2 years by the destruction of these 3 very important nuclear weapons facilities. The Israelis helped too in a 12-day war. They killed quite a few nuclear weapons scientists. They knew where they were, where their homes were, even where their bedrooms were, and they killed them all at once. So they set them back. This was America projecting its power, saying, I have said, as Trump has said, as every president has said, but others haven't taken action, this regime, dedicated to death to Israel and death to America, is not getting nuclear weapons. I'm sorry. You don't need them. You're not going to have them. We're not going to stop you. You want to try again? We'll stop you again. Does that make it a forever war? In a sense, perhaps it does, because President Trump doesn't want to, he's not interested in regime change. It's just more work that he wants to do there. It would be nice if the people of Iran would bring down this terrible, brutal government.
And they
that
want
rules
to,
them.
for the record,
But
the
it's not an easy
Iranians,
thing to do. It's
the
not an
Persians,
easy thing to do.
no, it's not.
I mean, I root for them, absolutely.
I do too.
It's not it. So that was the projection of American power, and guess what? It did very well. Now, we've had other projections of American power. For example, we decided to join in against Hitler in World War II. And there are those on the far right, let's be clear, people like Tucker Carlson, who are saying, well, we shouldn't have been involved in World War II. Maybe Hitler wasn't so bad. Maybe it's Winston Churchill who was the villain there. Why didn't Britain stay neutral? Why was it Britain's business if Hitler wanted to take over France, Czechoslovakia, the nations of the various nations of the East? Maybe we should have just let that happen. You know, the neocons don't like that, but we like that. Well, okay, I'll take that fight, but it's a ridiculous revisionist view to say that Hitler wasn't so bad and that Churchill was a very bad guy.
You know, when I saw some of those interviews with that faux historian and others, I'm trying to understand this because what's going on in front of my eyes. I don't believe my ears. I don't believe my eyes. But what I've come to disentangle is this idea that what did we accomplish? What did World War II accomplish where everything post-World War II, because of this thing called the post-war consensus, eventually led to the tragedy of the decline of America, in a sense, or crazy policies and, I don't know, I guess policies that have led to the degradation of our society. And I remember the question being or posed, maybe it was a hypothetical or rhetorical, but if we were fighting for democracy or freedom, liberty, better yet, what did we really achieve? We're worse off today than ever before. So how can we say that we won that war or won the Cold War? Did you hear any of this? Because this is what I've been hearing. And I've thought, wait a minute, was Winston Churchill responsible for just winning the war against the Nazis? And yes, the Cold War then came from that or after that. But how is he and his legacy and World War II responsible for the choices that America made and the West post-war? Does that make any sense to you, that whole narrative?
Look, I don't know if you want this discussion. If there's any I doubt you disagree that Nazism was a terrible
exactly
ideology.
That just seems so simple to me.
And for Hitler to have won World War II would not have been a good thing. And for the Japanese to have, along with them, won World War II, that would not have been a good thing for the U.S. or anybody else. We can have that argument, but I don't think you necessarily want to. I think
No,
you
I don't want
would
the
agree with that.
argument. What I'm saying is I do not understand how this argument is being made, how any intelligent person can think that the straits that we're in now, because our economy, the moral foundation that is America, that is based on Judeo-Christian or biblical values, our Constitution, everything about America today that is bad, somehow it's being projected, or at least this seems to be the message. It comes because we were too internationalist or too involved. We shouldn't have gotten involved in World War II. Have you heard this?
Yeah, but yes, but no intelligent person is saying that. Plenty of people are saying that, but no intelligent person is saying.
Oh, okay.
No person with the grasp of history is saying that we won World War II. We did so because of Roosevelt. We did so because of Churchill. Roosevelt said, by the way, and this is an important thing to keep in mind. Roosevelt said he could have had a ceasefire earlier. He could have said, you know what, let's see if we can make a deal with Hitler. He said, no, we want unconditional surrender from our enemies. We'll take nothing less.
Absolutely.
And that's what he decided on. And eventually that's what he got. Right. And we transformed, for example, Germany into what it is now. Not perfect, but it's a free nation.
It's a heck of a lot better than Nazi Germany.
Absolutely. And Japan, by the way, I drive a Japanese car. I mean, Japan is a free nation. If anything, we're trying to get Japan and successfully to increase its military spending because of the threat from communist China. And it needs to be a partner, not a dependent on us. Absolutely right. And Japan is understanding that. I would say we saved. But then what do we have? Look, we made an alliance with Stalin in World War II. That was strategic. That was useful. But some people were fooled by Stalin. But what happened afterwards? Well, the Iron Curtain, as Churchill put it, came down on a lot of countries in Europe. We freed some countries, liberated some countries from the Nazis, but we didn't. Well, some of those countries ended up under communist dictatorships afterwards. We could have continued to fight. We were tired. We didn't want to. So Czechoslovakia and Hungary and Poland, they all fell behind the Iron Curtain for quite a few years until at the end of the Cold War, or Cold War 1.0. I can tell you why this Cold War 2.0 is taking place now. A lot of them were freed. And, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are free countries today.
And if we were truly overstepping the projection of American power by that would, World War II, entering into World War II, I think that most Americans who actually know anything about history and truth agree that entering that war was a moral necessity and an existential, requirement to we had to do the right thing, and I think we had to save Europe in a sense, but it also would have had a domino effect. If Europe had fallen to the Nazis, America would have had an even greater threat once that empire had been consolidated. We would have had, say, an enemy at least as threatening as communist China is today, but in Europe. And the world would not be a better place. But we didn't decide to become the global policeman or to project our power or democracy to deal with the threat of communist, with actually engaging in war against the Soviet Union because of its overtaking of countries and bringing it behind that Iron Curtain and under their sphere and control and power. That would have been the next step. Some people, I think, I don't know, was it MacArthur who said we should have continued after World War II had come to an end? That could be debated, but it is, I think, an example or an illustration in history that once you do the job, then you can stop. That we were trying to stop something that was aggressive and active. We didn't continue then beyond that. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, look, we decided at the end of World War II, after the surrender of the Germans and the Japanese, not to take on the Soviet Union, who had been our ally in that conflict. After people should always remember that Stalin made a pact with Hitler early on.
Yeah.
Hitler betrayed Stalin. Only then did the Soviet Union join with us. Before that, they were splitting up Poland, and Russia was attacking, and the Soviet Union was attacking Finland, trying to take over Finland. This was 1939 we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, Stalin was betrayed by Hitler and then came to our side, and Hitler found it much more difficult than he had expected to take the Soviet Union, to take what he wanted, particularly to take the oil in Baku and Azerbaijan, all of that. It was very important that he couldn't fight on the Eastern Front with all his forces, because he was fighting on the Western Front as well, against the U.S., against Britain. It was Normandy, invasion there, all. Okay, well, what happened after World War II? A grand experiment. I understand. Let's create a united nation. Let's have international law.
And rule. The rule. They always talk about rule-based.
That's right. The U.S. set up an American-led, liberal, rules-based international order. And, since 1945, America has gotten a lot richer than it used to be. America has been free. Allies have been free. This has not been a bad time. But we have to understand what's happened more recently. And that is, yes, the Cold War was won, if you think of the Cold War as the U.S. versus the Soviet Union. The Cold War was not actually won if you think of the U.S. versus international communism, because the most powerful communist party in history is alive and well today and based in Beijing. And the Communist Party of China is allied, Xi Jinping, who rules it, is in a quote-unquote no-limits partnership with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And he has a close relationship with Ali Khamenei, supreme leader of Tehran, an Islamist regime. And the three of them have a close relationship with who? Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Because the Korean War, which followed World War II by just a few years, the Korean War never ended. Never ended. It was a ceasefire.
Yeah, the ceasefire.
The truce. It's been a frozen conflict since 1953. And Kim Jong-un still wants to, as he would put it, unify the Korean Peninsula. And he is getting help from Russia right now to do that more effectively. He is getting help with his intercontinental ballistic missiles and his other ballistic missiles and his submarines and other things. And he's getting that in exchange for what? The munitions that he is supplying to Putin to kill Ukrainians, and the soldiers he's supplying to Russia and to Putin to kill Ukrainians. So we now have these axis of aggressors, 4 of them, and they are viciously anti-American. And what Xi Jinping wants, and it's very clear, I can tell you how we know, he wants a new world order that he and the Chinese Communist Party would head. Communism, he still believes, is the future of the world. So if the Cold War is about communism versus the free and capitalist, whatever you want to call it, free market societies of the free world, we are in, at the very least, Cold War 2.0. And our adversary is much stronger and much more dangerous now than it was during the Cold War. And that means there's a lot of things we need to do if we want to win this one, because if we don't, our kids and our grandkids are not going to inherit the kind of country we want them to inherit.
It seems to me that it's foreign policy and military policy needs to be based on wisdom and nuance, because and I think maybe an understanding, and I believe that Trump is on the right track when he is, he's not a philosopher, but so maybe he doesn't communicate always in an extraordinarily well-spoken, philosophical way about what our foreign policy should be. But I think he's very, very clear that he is not for warmongering. He's not for projecting power because we need to make the world safe for democracy by making, Middle Eastern Muslim countries into democracies, for instance, which is never going to work. It never has. And so we do not. How would you describe the foreign policy that is neither belligerent and expansive and globalist in its action, or projecting American power to an unwise level or to degree? And how would you describe that? And what would you name it?
Listen, in a way, I think I don't argue with President Trump. America first means what's in America's interest. We're not against altruism, but first of all, what's in our interest. And sometimes you have to argue what is in our interest and what is not. Sometimes it's very obvious. Sometimes it may take a little discussion to say what's in our interest. Secondly, make America great again. What does that mean? Well, I don't think it means America in a retreat. I don't think it means America being intimidated. I thought it was I think Trump was exactly right. If you remember a week or so ago, you had Dmitry Medvedev, who is Putin's lapdog and attack dog. For a time, he was president of Russia, but he was always under Putin's thumb, if you remember. And just in case you don't remember this, he sat down at one point with Barack Obama on a TV show, and Barack Obama thought the mic was off, but it wasn't. And Barack Obama said to Dmitry Medvedev, this is who it was, I'll have more flexibility after my next election, meaning on missile defense systems in Europe. And Medvedev says, yes, very good to know. I will convey this to Vladimir. Okay?
I forgot about that. Yeah.
You forgot about that. But that was Medvedev.
That was a big moment there.
So Medvedev the other day, starts saying, oh, America is helping Ukraine. That's very dangerous. Maybe Vladimir Putin is going to want to use some nuclear weapons. And I don't mean nuclear weapons against Ukraine. I mean against America. Now, you could say, oh, we can't provoke Putin. That was a lot of the Biden policy. Can't provoke Putin. What did President Trump do? He said, I am repositioning nuclear submarines right now off the coasts of Russia.
Exactly.
Okay. There was from Russia, let's not get too excited about this. Medvedev doesn't speak for Putin. Yes, he does. Oh, no. And they backed off because he didn't say, okay, we're scared. He said, I'm not intimidated. I'm not kowtowing. You better understand who we are. You do not threaten us. And now Trump has tried very hard not to humiliate Putin, not to have him lose face. Every way. He is also, and this is important, he is sending munitions to Ukraine. But how is he doing it? He's saying, the Europeans, our allies, NATO allies, they can buy our munitions. We make the best in the world. And after they buy them, if they want to give them to their neighbors in Ukraine, we have no problem with that. That's our right. That's their right. Don't make a fuss about that. Very important that the Ukrainians get these munitions to defend themselves. Absolutely important. Now, I'm hopeful, I'm not confident, that the president will also, in addition to that, put serious sanctions on Putin. But Putin's coming to negotiate. I don't know when you're going to broadcast this show on, I think it's Friday, the 15th of August in Alaska. This is very interesting. And
remember when Putin made some comment that Alaska's really Russia's? Do you remember
it's
that?
It's not just Putin. No. This is a theme among ultra nationalists that Alaska is really belongs to Russia, not to America. Now, why does he think that? Can I tell you why he thinks that?
Yeah, tell me.
Okay. Here's what people don't understand. Russia is not really a nation state. It's an empire. It's always been an empire, and that's how Putin sees it. Why don't we think of it as an empire? Because unlike the British, they didn't go abroad in gunboats and take over countries. They went on foot from European Russia all the way through to the east, taking over places like Chechnya. What's Chechnya? It's a colony of Russia. Tatarstan, land of the Tatars. It's a colony of Russia. all the way to Vladivostok. What does Vladivostok mean? Vlad means conqueror. Vostok means east, conqueror of the east. Okay? But they went further than that. They went all the way to Alaska, and they had settlements in Alaska. And they went down into Northern California, like 90 miles north of San Francisco.
When was that?
And that was in the 19th century. Before 1867 is when we bought it, and I'll get to that in a minute, when we bought Alaska from Russia. They went down, and there's something you can go see north of San Francisco. I recommend it. It's called Fort Ross, which was a Russian force. Why is it called Fort Ross?
Is it Rus?
Да. Вот ты знаешь очень хорошо тебя. That's exactly what it's from. Fort Rus. Rus. That's what they call it. With Russ. Very good. Did you just guess that?
Yeah, I did. Because
that's very good. Very good. So what happened in about 1867 is it was called Seward's Folly. I think he was the Secretary of the Interior.
And wasn't that a great folly?
Yeah. He said, let's buy it. Now, what the Russians are saying is he didn't buy it. He just rented it or leased it. It's still ours. We have the first settlements there. We should get it back. It's unfair. And there is that. There is Russian revanchism. So Putin may think, I'm going to what should be and used to be and will be again a Russian possession. Alaska. Okay?
Over my dead body, by the way. I feel that the power, even injecting power, America's power, is one thing. When we take it kinetically around the world, and I think that has to be separated. There's an overlap to projecting American power by our words and deeds that are not that come short of actually beginning or starting a war. In other words, when President Trump said, "Oh, really? Well, I'm repositioning our nuclear subs," we didn't start shooting, right? But what I've noticed for so many decades, and obviously Ronald Reagan was the last guy that I know of as an American president who actually projected confidence and power and determination and an inflexibility in the sense that, no, there is a line across which thou will not cross or go. And I think that projection of power, if that is done with confidence and with an understanding of the purpose and the goal that must be achieved, not only for the immediate context, but also for the future, because every mistake we make now has reverberations into the future, throwing away the Panama Canal and, everything, there isn't anything Jimmy Carter did while president that, well, maybe one thing that was positive that didn't have negative consequences in the decades that we live in now and going in the future. So this is very important to understand. And you project power. You are a man, and it's usually a man, well, always so far, that will not be trifled with. That prevents, and meaning it though, by the way, in total sincerity and willingness to follow up on the threat. Because you know what? The threat of a coward is so transparent. You know that. That prevents, more often than not, actually engaging in or beginning a war that would be a forever war. It's weakness that causes war, is it not?
Weakness is provocative, especially to bullies. So yes, absolutely. If you show weakness, there's a kind of a Leninist saying that I think Putin has adopted, and that is what you want to do always is you want to probe with your bayonet. And as long as you feel mush, keep marching forward. If you should get deal, step back. That's exactly, in a way, that's just a metaphor for what you just said.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And yes, Russia is an empire. Russia could not be the size and shape it is without being qualified as an empire. And I also would say, well, I'd ask you rather, um, my inclination would be to call China an empire, but what we don't see is the same far-ranging, uh, military adventures that we've had in the United States, like I would say with Iraq, especially. I know that's we can't even really go down there because that would be a whole show, but it doesn't seem we don't really witness China going to war. We there's a threat of Taiwan, of course, but they're not taking over Bangladesh or.
But let me two things I want to point out to you. One is, yes, Russia's an empire, and Putin's frustration and the source of his ambition is Russia is a shrunken empire right now. The empire was largest under Stalin because he had all the satellites in Eastern Europe. And by the way, the U.S. never recognized Russia as a Soviet possession of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. We always considered them to be independent, even when they weren't.
I thought Roosevelt gave them away, basically, in that conversation they had. Where was it?
There's a difference between de facto and de jure. In other words, he never recognized it as legal possession. They always had embassies here, even when they were totally when they were Soviet republics, as they were called.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Absolutely. Okay, so the Russian Empire is shrunken right now, and Putin is trying to restore it. He thinks that's his mission. He thinks he's the Tsar, and Ukraine is usually important to that because the Tsar is the Tsar of all the Russias, and the three Russias are Russia proper. Belarus means White Russia, and Ukraine, it sort of means frontier, and he wants them back, and he wants more than that. And the reason he puts up statues and monuments to Stalin, as he has around the country, is because the Russian Empire, was biggest under Stalin. And it's
I didn't know you put up. I didn't know that factoid. That's kind of important.
Yes, including in the Moscow metro, and so Belarus, by the way, is a vassal state. It's not part of Russia right now, but it's a vassal state. Lukashenko, the dictator, very unpopular, does whatever Putin tells him to do. He'd be satisfied if he could get Ukraine to also be a vassal state, although, to make him part of Russia be better. He is, as you may know this, he has stolen tens of thousands of Ukrainian children and brought them to Russia, where he's brainwashing them that they are Russians, they're not Ukrainians, they're not to speak Ukrainian. And, and I think I'm very much the end of the day, Ukraine must retain its independence, sovereignty, its freedom. Let me talk about China. Very interesting to look at a map of China right now, because what you'll see is there's China, and then if you move west, you see two of its important colonies. One is called Tibet.
Yes.
It's part of the Chinese Empire. It's not Chinese. Tibetans have their own culture, language, religion.
Sure.
You know, north of Tibet is what? What they call Xinjiang. What does Xinjiang mean? New frontier. New frontier of what? The Chinese Empire. That's where the Uyghurs live. What's happening to the Uyghurs? According to the U.S. government, it's genocide of the Uyghurs taking place right now.
It's a terrible thing.
Also part of this empire, the Chinese Empire, is Manchuria, not the same as China, and parts of Mongolia. Now, they also want, as you say, Taiwan. That Xi Jinping is adamant that he is going to conquer Taiwan and take Taiwan. I've been there. It's free, prosperous, dynamic society, economically hugely important to America. I can explain why. He wants to take that. If he takes that over, then there's the Philippines and Japan and Australia. He'll dominate the Pacific, and this will be a very big step on the way to his final goal, which, as I say, is a Chinese communist-led world order. America, you back up, you retreat, you're over the hill, you're a has-been, we're in charge. And by the way, He's not doing it all militarily by any means, but the Belt and Road Initiative, you've heard of that, in place in Panama Canal under Chinese control. His influence in Latin America right now, what he's doing to Africa, which is a form of imperialism and colonialism, stealing their resources. Oh, this is very international. It's clever. It's not all kinetic, by which I mean it's not all by military means, by, as you say, but it is happening. And he prefers that you not kind of notice how he is attempting to dominate the world through debt traps, taking over harbors in various countries. How do you do
the
that?
harbor initiatives are incredible.
Which you can use for the Navy, the biggest Navy in the world, bigger than our Navy now, with a shipbuilding capacity we can't even imagine. So understand, this is what's going on. That's why Communist China is the most important adversary we have, and an adversary we have to deal with. But again, an adversary that is hand in glove working with Putin, with Ali Khamenei, and with Kim Jong-un.
Of course, I know about Tibet and, the Uyghurs. And so I considered already China to be an empire. But I wasn't really thinking about, I think I was dividing in my mind this BRICS thing, which I can't always tell whether they're being successful, because there's been some real challenges, because when China goes to build something, it's garbage. The train system that they have in Nigeria, I don't know if it's what country it's in, but in Africa, it's falling apart. It's breaking down, and it can't sustain itself financially. And so I see things like that. But anyway, my point is that BRICS is a colonial initiative, and it's building the empire, but it is doing it in a very clever way, so that it's sort of under the radar screen, that the average Joe American and the average Joe European, and whatever, even the countries that they're working with, don't fully recognize, or at least it's not spoken about as the reality that this is a colonial project and it's empire building.
Keep in mind, there's two things. One is the Belt and Road Initiative, which is these harbors, which is various land, it is a way that the Communist Party of China and China's rulers are spreading their influence and economic power around the world. And then there's BRICS, which is a sort of alliance of Brazil, Russia, Iran, China. Unfortunately, India is part of it.
South Korea, South America. South Africa.
Yeah, and it is meant to be. It is meant to be anti-American. It is
Sure.
another layer of this effort that that Xi Jinping is making to replace America as world leader. See, and I don't think you can let China replace America as world leader if you want to make it.
When we're talking about neocons, right, and that's how we began this conversation, and the charge is that we want to be out there, the global policemen. We want to have our fingers and tentacles and everything. We want all of this grandiose thinking, but all it does is it ends up bankrupting America or impoverishing America and killing American soldiers. So tell me that in light of what we're looking at with Russia and China in particular, of course the others as well, what is supposed to be the response, or what are the consequences of not projecting our power in a wise but strong manner, so that we can check this kind of, empire, coalition of empires?
Well, we either maintain leadership of a free world, or there will be no free world. That doesn't mean we have to be projecting power at all times everywhere. But again, so far, President Trump in this term has done pretty well with it. Again, he is refused to be intimidated by Putin. He has destroyed, at least for a couple of years, the ability of the regime in Iran to get nuclear weapons. He's negotiating with the Communist Chinese. We'll see how effectively. He's going to negotiate soon over Ukraine with Putin. We'll see how effectively. But he is trying. But
I think I know that that's all happening. I'm not always excited because a lot of times I just know that they lie, and no matter what we negotiate, we have to keep that in mind because none of it is sincere.
Don't believe in. Don't do a lot of verification and no trusting, and always make sure that, as George Shultz would say, the shadow of your power